All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the JavaScript Jam podcast. I'm here
Woo!
with my co host, Scott, and we are interviewing Ryan today. Ryan Turnquist, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for our audience? Let them know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, like Anthony said, my name is Ryan Turnquist. I'm a core member of the Marko team, working for eBay. Yeah, like I guess that's like what I primarily do. I'm also
Cool.
a member of the Solid core team, working on Solid Jazz.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, were you already involved in Solid before you got involved in Marko? Or is there any kind of connection there?
Yeah, no, totally. Like the Solid stuff led directly to me, getting involved with Marko and ultimately hired by eBay.
That's funny you
Since
say that
Ryan
because
was,
that's
working on Ryan was working at eBay on Marko, and then he left to go to Netlify, and then
yeah, and
this
Ryan being the
position
creator of
opened. So
Solid, for anyone who doesn't know, so
yeah,
that's why there's
oh yeah,
a tight connection there between the two projects and teams. And I've noticed that with Solid and Astro as well. Solid seems to be a really good like feeding ground to all these other projects because it's just a great community and they do great work and people seem to get great experience there.
yeah. I mean, yeah, Ryan Carniato is like super great at getting like including people in the open source conversation. So
Yeah, if I could
been great for
imagine
that.
any of the mentors I would most like to be like, I'd want to take half of B Dougie and half of Ryan Carniato and just combine them. That's who I'd want to be. Great. So why don't we talk a little bit about like what is Marko? How does it fit into the whole eBay mission? And yeah, because I think it's technically a very interesting project. It's not very well known. It's kind of become more well known recently, but it's very old actually. So I don't know if you're like a super expert on the history of Marko. Maybe just talk a little bit about like kind of where it came from as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not a great historian of Marko or anything, but yeah, it's been around since like 2012, I want to say. JavaScript, framework for building web pages, web apps. Yeah, Marko is interesting. It's a little bit different since it's like a multi-page architecture first um, framework, and it was basically designed to fit like eBay's needs, like e-commerce needs, which like the primary thing was like performance, like initial page performance. So like getting you from like a Google search results page to like a product page or something like that quickly, to you know prevent people from bouncing or whatever. So
Right.
yeah, so
Let's just
Marco's been
hone in.
around for
Can we just hone in on that actually real quick? Because I think this is an important thing to really emphasize is the single page versus multi-page kind of split. And like let's define those terms. And Scott, this is going to be like very relevant to the thing we're building with the new JavaScript Jam website because we're using Astro and we're building it in more of a multi-page architecture. And so for you, when you hear the term multi-page architecture, you shouldn't actually be too confused. It's actually just like a regular website, right?
yeah.
So have you heard the term like single page application before, Scott? I'm
Absolutely.
assuming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
spa. Yeah. So basically,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to go into there and if it, doesn't reload as you're changing through things, it's basically a spa. If it's reloading, you
Mm-hmm.
probably have multi-page, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. So, but there's issues with spas is kind of the reason why we're now seeing this kind of return to the multi-page application because even though you get the nice navigation and like quick kind of page changes and more app-like feel from a single page app, there's performance costs, there's SEO costs, there's just like technical debt costs because of how complicated these friggin' JavaScript frameworks are. And the thing with eBay, and this is where we can wrap back into the history, is that with eBay, they wanted to optimize for first page load and SEO and basically having just a single link that can take you to a product page and have it like instantly load and be as performant as possible. So that's why Marko was always like a single page application just doesn't make sense for us. Is that kind of right, Ryan?
Yeah, that's totally right. Yeah, I mean, like it all came out of, originally I think eBay was written in like Perl, and then they moved to like C++. Obviously the backend. They moved to like C++, and then Java, and then eventually they had this whole initiative of letting developers kind of like choose their like their stack. So there's obviously a lot of interest in Node.
So I'm sure went perfectly
and,
fine and nothing went wrong.
Yeah, it was kind of like, hey, choose your stack, but you gotta prove that it's going to be like viable. So there were all these like performance metrics that were you have to like be this faster. You have to be as fast as the thing you're replacing, or better. And then obviously like adding developer experience and stuff like that. So that's kind of like where Marko came out of. Yeah. So like it's like the React. I think React was probably around at that time, and it's just like wasn't really gonna work for that. Meeting those performance goals.
Yeah, the fact that they both came out around the same time is really interesting. So Marko and React are both close to like 10 years old. And basically React instantly became a big thing, became very popular, and now it's just the dominant web framework. And it's taken 10 years for people to realize the issues with it and arrive back at what Marko did in the first place, because now all the kind of problems that people find with React are things that need to be kind of hacked into React now, like things like partial hydration and streaming. And we also have things like Quick that are doing resumability. But I've been having this conversation on Twitter recently that resumability, a term that was kind of invented by Quick, is actually implementing an architecture that Marko was already able to do.
Yeah, I think, I was talking with Michael, who's one of the other core members on the Marko team, and he was like, yeah, I think we had resumability in like Marko 3. Obviously it wasn't kind of like as like developer friendly or good as what we're going for in Marko 6 and what Quick has, but it's kind of like pretty interesting that we're like rediscovering these things that we we had 10 years ago or whatever. So.
Yeah, I'm a huge history nerd when it comes to stuff like this. And some people will be like, oh yeah, like Marko did it first, but no one really uses Marko. It's like, why should I care? And it's like, well, it just helps you better understand why these things are the way they are and how we got to where we are. But also it should clue you into studying history can give you tips to the future. Like if you had been somewhere in the middle of this journey, like, around 2020, and you discovered Marko, you would have seen where things were going to go in 2022 by looking into the past. And so it's like, it's so valuable to actually learn these things because you can start to see these longer term patterns and how the different things are influencing each other and where ideas are coming from first. And the thing with Quick and Marko, this is actually, there's a term called parallel discovery that I think is really interesting, where there's like a individual groups or people kind of get some innovation or some discovery within a field, and they both arrive at the same thing, but without being influenced by each other in complete isolation. And as far as I know, Mishko was influenced by something called Wiz, and that's kind of where he got the idea from resumability for. And obviously Marko couldn't have got it from Quick because Quick didn't exist at the time. So yeah, it's just super, super interesting stuff. But I want to get into Marko Run because that's what you've been working on. And this is something that is going to really make Marko more usable for people outside of eBay. That's kind of at least how I see it, as the point being.
Absolutely.
And to make kind of like a Marko meta framework, right?
Yeah. So Marko Run is what I've been working on for the last few months. And like you said, it's basically our meta framework for Marko. And you're spot on. The whole goal of it was to try to make, getting started with Marko like as simple as possible. And then there's basically another goal, which was we want to actually be able to use Marko Run within eBay for the eBay apps. That way it actually gets, it gets the development resources and all that that comes with like actually using it ourselves. So yeah.
So when you think of a meta framework, what are the features that kind of come along with that?
Yeah. So I mean, the big ones, obviously, like routing, providing like a solution for routing, and really like Marko actually has like most of the other features kind of like already built into it. So like Marko Run actually doesn't really provide all that much. It's mostly just providing a sort of like opinion on how to do routing, and like, so we're using file system routing, and like opinions on like how to sort of like structure things, and just like tying it all together, making the developer experience like as good as we can.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're probably good then to start getting into the code, unless you had any questions, Scott.
No, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sweet. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and you're able to add that to the stream, right, Scott?
Yeah, we're in.
All right, cool. Okay, so I've got a little gist set up here, which is some steps of what we're going to do. I'm going to be using your kind of a init basic template for Marko Run. And let's just show what Marko Run is. So if we go here, this is the repo. I like this little logo you've got. And yeah, get your app up and running with Marko. And we have,
we're pretty clever.
Yeah, and we got some of the things that we've talked about here, things like the routing, you have layouts, middleware. We're going to show all of these things in the example, and it's blazingly fast, so it's safe to use. If it wasn't blazingly fast, then you couldn't use it.
Yeah, you have to have that. It's a requirement.
Yeah, and then this is a pretty long README. This actually includes kind of all the docs of what's going on here. I would recommend getting that into the actual Marko site proper sooner rather than later, but we'll go ahead and just get into our kind of tutorial here.
And I will say that we do have a TypeScript starter now that Marko has TypeScript support. So if you want to use TypeScript,
I'm purposely avoiding TypeScript in this demo for my own sanity, and because just a lot of things already were complicated and breaking. So when I'm in that situation, removing TypeScript usually simplifies it. I know people might disagree with that, but I'm talking about like build complexity specifically. So that's pretty, I think, undeniable in that sense. But
are those issues you're seeing with Marko Run or?
No, just how it all interfaces together. Once you add in deployment steps, different versions of Node, ESM versus CJS, it adds so much complexity there that requires being figured out before you can even get any benefits from types, that most people who work in projects that don't require having to go through all those steps don't realize this. But yeah, it's a whole thing. But yeah, it's got nothing to do with Marko Run.
Okay, yeah, it just might be interesting to show Marko Run does some code, some types generation that will type your routable files. So it might be interesting to show that off at some point.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, we can just go with the JavaScript for now.
Yeah. And Marko was actually created before TypeScript even existed. You had to go through a lot of work to get it there. Yeah. So I sympathize with you wanting to show it off, because I know you put a lot of work into it. So
yeah, I didn't, but Dylan did.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, Dylan. Okay, so here's our home page and starts. This is cool. You got a little mouse move effect here. That's really nice. And our project structure, we've got, as you said, kind of file-based routing. So what's with the underscore index?
Yeah, so underscore is basically a folder starting with an underscore is not included in the route, so it's a pathless directory. So we just, there's a history in Marko where you you might put all your files into a single folder. So you might have your Marko file and tests and styles and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we just by default we stuck that in the underscore index. It was that, or just underscore, or just stick it all in the root, or in the root of the routes folder.
Alrighty. So what is doing this kind of effect here is our mouse mask component, and this is where we get into kind of the more component stuff. And this is class-based right now. Later in the demo, we'll show some of the tags API, but if you want to explain kind of what's going on in this file right now.
Yeah, so basically, Marko files are, they're sort of a single file component type thing. So we have, at the top, we have our markup, and you'll see that there's this for, which is a kind of a funny way of doing this. But yeah, we have this for tag here that's that's looping over this markup here, or it's looping over the range from 1 to 2 and like generating. So basically generating like 2 copies of this div, and then the div has, you know, all that stuff. Then we have this class, and like once a component has a class, that basically makes it like a client side component. So like by default, nothing like components that aren't like for the client won't get shipped to the client. So anyways, this one has this class here, and there's like this onCreate method, which does about what you'd expect. It sets some stuff up when the component's created. And then there's like this event handler move, which is tied into the on mouse move. You know,
yeah, what you're doing here is really clever. This is actually when I was first learning to code, I was first learning JavaScript, I found a tutorial that showed me how to do this, and it totally blew my mind, because what's happening is that you're taking the actual mouse itself and tracking where it is on the page using XY coordinates, and then mapping those to basically change as you move the mouse around the page.
I literally just read something on Twitter that was about the person who created the mouse in 1969, I think it was, and how they were using it to just show where it was on, you know, using XY components to show where it was on the screen, and then therefore using it on a GUI, which is pretty cool. So anyway,
yeah, totally. All right, so that is
basically
go ahead.
Basically, this whole effect here is driven, like you said, by these XY coordinates, and then we're just sticking those in a CSS variable, this like mouse X and mouse Y CSS variable, and then you can see like there's the styles down below that are getting applied.
Yeah, awesome. So, and then how does it actually get applied then to this component? Because we have this thing happening here.
Yeah. So one thing that Marko does is we have like automatic like discovery of tags. So like this mouse move tag that you're using here, you know, you can see it's not being like imported. You could import it if you wanted to, but we just have like a convention where it looks in certain places for these you know, for Marko files.
Does that mean you need to be very careful about how you name your components?
I mean, you just need to name them like whatever, you know, you want them to be like discovered as.
And don't put spaces.
But yeah, you could
stuff
like
like that.
You could import it directly. What's that?
And don't put like spaces in the file name and stuff like that.
Yeah, I actually don't know what happens with spaces. Anyway.
I would assume it wouldn't work, but who knows?
Yeah,
don't do that. Yeah, it's just that's something that I kind of think about sometimes, is like just the conventions of how we name our files, because if your framework has to take a thing from one file to another, it ultimately is having to find that file, and that requires some sort of like searching for a file name. And I just know this from like Redwood, there's like lots of ways in which that can go wrong that people don't really think about.
Yeah, and they throw Windows in the mix.
Yeah, totally. Oh my God. And then here we got the layout. So what's happening with this layout component?
Yeah, so this is this component, you can see it has like the sort of document root in it. But yeah, the way Marko Run like works is we have these layouts. This is named, we took inspiration from Svelte. So we have plus layout and then plus page. And we did that because we wanted to be like, you know, we wanted to like opt in, or people to opt into like the pages that are the files that were going to become part of like their routes, right? Like, so if you have like some other Marko files next to your page or whatever, you know, you don't want this like accidentally get included as a route. So that's why we use like directories as the paths, and then have these like well-named, you know, or well-known names for like the routable files. Anyways, so the layouts basically all wrap around, like the layouts wrap each other from the outside, and then the page basically suggests that there's a route here, and then the page is like the innermost piece of your, you know, UI. So basically it's like nested routing, or nested like, nested.
Yeah, this is actually,
like
Redwood
layouts.
does a similar thing. We have a layout kind of thing like this. I think at this point, pretty much all frameworks do. And so there's two things that you kind of want to hone into here. This is what you're saying, where we're actually taking the page, so input render body is importing this thing, and then the global.meta.page title, that's this, which we haven't looked at yet. This is our meta information. And that's why if we look here at the top, it says, welcome to Marko. If we change that, we'll see that change up here.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. So yeah, the input.render body, that's basically like that's Marko's like props.children essentially. Mm-hmm. The naming has like some history, so it's not the like most obvious name, but yeah. So that's how you render like the inner. You know, if this layout's going to render like whatever's underneath it, so you stick that there, and then like the next layout would render.
I would argue this could be a good name because you're rendering the body. It's in the body tags.
Yeah. And then, yeah, like you said, we also have that like plus meta, and that could be like a JSON file or a JavaScript file. And that's where you can put some like, you know, basically statically known like metadata. And so in this case, yeah, we're using it for the page title. Since we don't have access to like, you know, since this layout file doesn't have access to like the page Marko component, yeah, we stick it in the metadata.
Okay.
And so every like page can have a meta file.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with your naming convention here, and this is what we're going to see with what we create next. We're going to just create an about page. So we first create an about folder, and we're going to do the same thing our index folder has, and create a plus page.marko and a plus meta.json, and then we'll put a little HTML there and a little JSON there. And then over here, we'll just have to go to /about, and then we'll see our about page.
Yep.
That's all pretty straightforward. Now we've got these handler functions. Now this is interesting. What's going on with these handlers?
Yeah, so this is how you can define basically like API routes, or basically, you know, if you need to do some like dynamic thing for a request, like this is where you can do that. So once again, taking inspiration from Svelte, and I think probably a lot of other frameworks are doing this now, but you know, you just export these the HTTP verbs.
So is this like an API route in Next?
So it's kind of both, right? It's like it's an API route, but this handler actually gets called before the page, if there's a page associated with. So yeah, you have, this is in the index route, right? The just slash route. So this handler will get called before the page is rendered, and essentially the rendering of the page will be the like this like next function that you see here on line like 5. So it's like you do your like server-side work, and then you render your page. And you know, this handler could return some other response instead of returning the page, right? And obviously that would be for the GET request, and then you know the post would, you know, you could do whatever you want there.
Okay, yeah, and in a second we're gonna put in some middleware as well that this will involve. But first, if we see, we can. So this is just in our index. So if we look at our kind of local host 3000, if we curl it and send a post request, we should expect to get back this for it to say posted and then give us a 200 status. So if we test that over here, that's exactly what we see. All right. Now we have an about page, which means we need an about link. So I'm just going to edit our layout here to add a couple links there. And now we can see we can go to our about page and our home page. And then we're going to add in some 404 handling, because you actually have a convention for that. So right now this is happening, but we can actually get a nicer example with a 404. Oh, actually, sorry, that's going to be after the middleware step. Getting ahead of myself. So middleware. Explain middleware. Middleware took me a long time to understand, just like as a concept.
Yeah, so I think middleware is kind of analogous to like layouts for pages. So like the handler is sort of the endpoint, and then the middleware is just some code that's going to get called before that handler or that page. And so this one just has a default function because we run these for all verb types. And yeah, so basically we'll run your middleware, and then, you know, for some route, you know, we'll run the middlewares in order of from like the root to the deepest most middleware in that.
You have a diagram in
yeah,
here.
maybe bring up that diagram might be
this is a comprehensive diagram. Hold on, wait, there we go. That's what I want to do. So
yeah,
what
so
the heck is happening here?
Yeah, so you can see there's like ultimately the page we're rendering is like route/about page.marko. And so first we run your middleware, and then that middleware calls the next middleware. So first we run like the middleware defined at slash, and then we run the middleware at /about, and then we run your handler, and then the handler basically executes like the page. So like the two layouts that are defined plus the page, they all get combined into ultimately the page that's rendered. And then you can like back out, right? And that lets you, so your handlers or your middleware can basically like be involved with the beginning and the end of like the request.
I'm so glad I had you here to explain this to me, because I first saw this diagram and I'm like, I think I get it, but having you walk me through it and actually like looking at it piece by piece, I now actually get what's going on here. That's really clever. So if that doesn't make any sense to people who are watching right now, check this out. So let's run this again. And what's going to happen is we're going to console log some stuff. So here is when the page gets loaded, this runs, and it actually logs out the time it takes to, is this the time it takes from like the request being made to getting it back?
Yeah, that's the time it's taking, yeah, to like return or like generate the response, which does not include like since the Marko page is like streamed down to the client, it doesn't include like the streaming time, obviously.
Yeah,
it's just so it's the time that the request is to take. Yeah,
so it gives us the request, which is get localhost 3000, then completed in, and then if it's successful, it'll say successfully and give us a performance, and if not, it will give you an error. And if we look back to the handler here, we then see this is being console logged as well right here.
Yep. Yeah, and so yeah, basically the handlers and the middlewares both have the same function signature, and it's this context object, which contains like everything about the request. So like, the parameters, the request itself, metadata, all that kind of stuff for that route. And then there's this next function. The next function basically like you call it and it just does it, it returns a response that's being generated by like the next step. So like each middleware typically is like, you call the next thing and then return that response. It's optional to call the next function. So like if you just don't do anything, if you return undefined from your middleware or your handler, like we call next for you just because it's like just convenient. Okay. But if you wanted to do something, if you wanted to augment the request or the response that you got back from like the next middleware, the page or whatever, you can then await it. And then now you have that response and you can do something with it.
In this instance, was the handler, I mean, obviously like the console log showed handler first and then it showed the middleware. Am I wrong? Or was that?
Yeah, so you can see it. You can see it like logs
when it logged
request
it out.
Started.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
When it logged it out.
Yeah, so it logs this, which is this part.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
And then it logs this.
Then it has the handler. Okay. And then the last
the
part
handler
was
gets
what?
This, which is this part.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So that's the completion of everything. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
This is a great demo about whoever wrote this code to demonstrate what's happening here. It's like very, very, very clear.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I read it, so that's great to hear.
Good job, man. Yeah, no, this is great. This is like really exciting stuff because I learned Marko by itself around sometime last year. And like all the component syntax like took a little while to understand, and just like the general project structure. And then once I got there, I'm like, cool, now how can I do all this other stuff that all these other frameworks do? And it like wasn't there yet. And this is where Marko Run comes in.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited to for this project, and I think it's just going to make Marko like way more approachable. And plus, we're planning on using it in eBay, so I'm like, I think we're going to.
That's where you know it's going to get really good.
A lot of testing on it.
So. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then this is just one more kind of nice convention here. You can create some automatic 404s and 500 messages. And then if you go to a route that does not exist, then we get this custom not found page.
Yep. Yeah. So you can define a top level 404 and top level like error handling page 500 page. And they get if you have a layout at the top level, they have access to that layout, as you can see in this 404 page.
Yep, that's right. And all right. Cool. We can actually skip that step. All right. Marko 6, tags API. This is the new. This is the not even actually technically released yet new. This is a preview. This is beta. Technically, Marko Run is also beta, I think. But what is the tags API?
Yeah, so the tags API is kind of like the new API that we're using in Marko 6, and it replaces our current like class API that we have in Marko 5. So like when we were looking at that mouse mask component, we had that class that was, like you defined your state there, and you defined.
Are you ready?
Handlers and all that.
We're gonna click the counter. It counted. All right, good job.
Woohoo!
All right, so this is a counter. Now, if this wasn't a counter, this wouldn't technically be a real component, because a component has to be a counter, right? If every tutorial I've used is correct, a component means a counter, right?
Yeah, it's the best demo.
It's good though. Actually, I'm glad that we've all kind of standardized on the counter as an example, because it lets someone who has built a counter before be able to figure out your component syntax extremely quickly. You have a count, starts at 0. When you click, it bumps the count up, and then you show the count somewhere. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, so really the tags API here is like the let and the sort of controversial / which separates the tag name from the thing that it returns, essentially.
So what other words would be here aside from let? Or is it always let?
So yeah, no. So let's just a tag. So let is the let tag, which is part of the tags API, and it's going to be part of Marko 6, and that's essentially state. We also have there's a
right now
article written here by Ryan.
There's Ryan's got a couple articles, and that's exactly what we're looking at right here. There's not really docs yet for the tags API, though, I don't think, except maybe this Git repo is going to be the main thing. And so you have this example again, and that's pretty much it. So do you have examples of other tags anywhere?
Well, if you go back to that article that Ryan wrote, I think he
basically Ryan's article
all the ones that
were the docs right now.
It's probably the most accessible thing right now. Yeah. So we have let is like mutable state essentially, and then we have const, which is like
use reducer.
Okay. But the main thing with the tags is like they're completely composable, so like you can just create whatever tag you want using the sort of like fundamental tags.
Yeah, someone's really got to at least take these screenshots, write them into code, and stick them in your tags API. Because this is like, if this is the only thing available for the tags API right now, it's not super great.
Yeah,
But,
it's a preview, so yeah, no, docs are definitely like the to do. So
yeah, all good. Yeah, that's part of my job is letting people know where they can improve their docs. So not putting you on blast, just letting you know what your next step should be. Cool. So that's pretty much the whole project. Are there other things that you want to at least call out that we didn't show in this before we go to the deploy step?
I guess we could talk about adapters. We could talk about like configuration.
Yeah. So for adapters,
I guess there isn't a whole lot of configuration to show, but
yeah. So for your adapters, you have a similar convention where you're using just Vite configs. This is also why Vite is so great, because Vite allows a lot of these frameworks to kind of standardize on stuff. So you're using the Netlify adapter, which is not surprising. And you also have a node adapter and a static adapter. So the way that I'm going to end up doing it with Edgio is going to be using the node adapter. And this is the one that's going to be really useful for people who want to deploy this on something that has not already had an adapter created for it, because it's basically just letting you run it wherever you can run node. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the node adapter is the default sort of adapter if you don't specify any other adapter. It lets you run easily on node, and essentially, converting like the HTTP incoming request or incoming message or whatever it's called into like a WhatWiki style request, and then similarly converting the WhatWiki response into a server response, like a node server response. So yeah, that's kind of like the adapters kind of have a couple different there's like a couple different things that the adapter are doing. So the adapter lets you like do stuff during the build. It lets you specify lets the adapter specify like a default sort of like entry for your sort of like the server part that's going to do the conversion of, or like it's going to handle like converting request response types for you. And
so that's
so like
this. So like when you're talking about being able to kind of insert things with the server.
So I mean, this is like so this is
like of the entry point. I mean, because we look something like this, there's no entry point in this configuration.
Right. Yeah. So like by default, like we provide an entry point for you, which is essentially your server. So like the adapter can provide, it's like at least for node, like the adapter provides a node server for you, but you could write.
So this could be index.ts instead of my-app-server.ts, and this is basically your entry point.
Like
file.
This could be like, so you could write your own server here and then use that as the entry point instead of like relying on the default one.
So something like this, bam.
Yeah.
So
so now you have like full control over how your server works, and then you're just importing this like router middleware from the node adapter, and that provides you like all the routing stuff.
Yep. Okay, so going back to this, so this is my now Edgio project that we're going to deploy, and I kind of jumped ahead a couple steps because I didn't want to have to walk through all these things. This is the part where you have to write a whole bunch of Edgio specific code that's going to be hidden behind a connector eventually. So explaining all this code is completely irrelevant, and we're just going to ignore it and pretend it's not there. And then we have this Edgio config, which tells us that we're using the Edgio connector, and we have an entry point, which links us into here. But as I said, that's kind of Edgio specific guts stuff. Whereas this is the thing that's actually relevant to Marko. And so once you got all that set up, then we can do Edgio deploy, and that's going to do its thing. And I'll take a quick second, and here it's kind of showing us we're getting an about page, our index page, which hits a handler. We also have a post handler that we showed earlier, and we have our 404 and our 500.
Nice. Yeah. So yeah, Marko Run, when you build like the production version, it's gonna it'll generate this table for you so you can get an idea of like what routes it knows about.
And I like how it even shows you the sizes. So is this 0 kilobytes because there's no JavaScript on this page?
Yeah, so that's the client side. Yeah. So it'll be 0 if you don't have
So
any
we're at 0 JavaScript.
class components. So yeah.
You've been seeing there's been this Twitter argument about whether 0 JavaScript is like a good goal or whether it should be thought as a goal, as a baseline, or not thought about at all.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, great. So and then here we go.
I don't think it's the goal.
Yeah, it's an absurd goal if you want a site that does something.
So cool. This is deployed out?
Yep, this is it. This is live. So here is our link, ajcwebdev-marko-run-edgio-default.layer0-limelight. Fun stuff. These are our two previous companies' names before we were Edgio, Layer 0, and Limelight combined into Edgio. So you can see the history of our tech debt within this link.
Nice. That's awesome.
Great. Cool. So that's the whole demo. So I think we already showed people where most of the relevant links are in terms of Marko Run, tags, API. All these links will be in the show notes in the description as well. And then you got just regular old markojs.com for your home page, which is nice and retro looking. And then we got docs. You can try it online, which I'm assuming is going to kick us into one of these guys. So that's pretty nice. Our playground. Yeah, and this is actually, let's talk about, this is the component library, right? Or you have a lot of components here. So
yeah, we just have these
yeah, go ahead.
Looks like there's an issue.
Yeah, so this is kind of letting you just walk through a lot of different custom components you've got, which is really nice because you can give people like hello worlds and all that kind of stuff, but it's nice to actually have more kind of full built out components. And you can't scroll in this, by the way. Yeah, so and this is
that's the bug list.
Oh yeah, right. Fun stuff. And yeah, are there any other there's there's me. There's a Discord as well. So you can find that here in the README. And then there's a Twitter here as well. This is also me. I said that Marko is forever destined to be the Nikola Tesla to the Edisons and Marconis of the front end world. So if you know this history here, basically Edison and Marconi got credit for inventing a lot of stuff in electricity that Nikola Tesla had done first. All right, cool. You can stop sharing my screen, Scott.
There you go.
Great. Cool. Thanks so much, Ryan. That was super duper fun. Do you have any other comments or things you want our listeners to kind of know about at this point?
Yeah, I don't know. I think just go check out Marko and use Marko Run to get started with it. And,
cool.
Just excited to get more people in the Marko camp.
If someone were to contribute, what would be something that is both needed and feasible for someone who's never used it before?
Use Marko or
so like if someone's like, I want to get, there's always people like, I want to get involved with open source, and like you just need to kind of hand them a project and then they'll go do something. But if you just hand someone a project like React, they can't contribute to React. It's impossible. So is there actually things like, so what I would say from what I've seen is that I think helping with docs and examples would be really useful. If someone were to build a Marko tutorial, like I'm working on one right now. I think that would probably be pretty useful for people.
Yeah, that'd be useful. Yeah, definitely like docs, useful. Like for Marko Run, I think like building like more adapters and stuff like that. So we, can have parity with, these other frameworks for like deployed targets. So I think that would be a good thing to help out.
Yeah, the table stakes seem to be Netlify, Vercel, Cloudflare. Almost everyone has all three of those, and soon they will all have Edgio ones as well, because that will build them and hand them to each project.
We force them.
Just to get started, I wanted to have like, something like Netlify that uses like, normal or like uses the wiki request response type stuff. Obviously Node, and then like static was like another kind of like, different one. And so I feel like those three are good examples for then like you can probably build like any of the other adapters that you would need based on one of those. So.
Cool. Scott, do you have any questions as we close out?
No, this was super cool. I was really following along actually pretty well. So yeah, it's neat. I like it.
Sweet.
Thanks.
Great.
Yeah, this
cool,
was super
man.
fun.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to kind of continuing to build stuff out with Marko. I have a tutorial that I wrote like 90% of a long time ago, and then I kind of sat on it and didn't finish it, and then I'm like, I'll just put it out when Marko 6 comes out, and then I realized that that could be a while, so I'll probably finish it up and put it out maybe in like a month or two, and include like the kind of Edgio stuff in there. So yeah, keep your eyes on that. And yeah, I think we can close it out.
Is that just like a general guide, or?
It'll be a tutorial that will walk you through a lot of like the stuff actually in the Marko docs in terms of like what are tags and how does all that kind of work, just like the actual component stuff. And then it'll have the Marko Run stuff, which didn't exist when I first wrote it. So it kind of is gonna change some of the projects so that you end up kind of building out the structure of what the starter is doing. And then it'll be the deployment stuff after that.
Nice. Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been the JavaScript Jam podcast, and we will catch you next time.
Woo! See you in the next one.